all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon. No! 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 No!
Didn't you miss me?
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am Possessed Bill, filling in for SaWGuy, and today we're going to talk about episode 52, The Conjuring. Conjuring, I will say this, has to be one of the scariest fucking films of all time, right? Some can even argue that it's even scarier than The Exorcist. Really? Well, without further ado, let's find out and let's get this shit started.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
I ain't no fucking clown.
That is better.
Now clear your minds. He knows what scares you.
I'm just gonna bash your brains.
What the hell? The boogeyman is real, and you found him. What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Hell. Everybody loves popcorn.
Now, The Conjuring will go down as one of the most scariest films of all time. I know some people are going to say it's as scary as Exorcist. Some will even call it it's even scarier than The Exorcist, right? And, you know, I've always asked myself, what makes it scarier than The Exorcist? Well, if you look at it, you know, The Conjuring is based on real life shit that went down. This is based on real paranormal investigations from the Warrens, right? And if you don't know who the Warrens are, this film does a damn good job explaining to you who they are, right? So you have the Warrens, which is consisted of Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're a married couple, and they're one of the most well-known paranormal investigators out there. I mean, it's synonymous when you think of ghost hunting, demonologists, and everything. You always got to think of the Warrens, because they were the ones that really kind of brought it into the light. They were the first ones that started to do, like, investigations and stuff like that, right? Well, out of all the years that they've been doing this, you know, they've kept a couple of cases kind of tucked away because they were so malevolent. They were so evil and dark, right? So with the idea of The Conjuring, the idea came up, you know, back in the late 80s. The writer, Tony DeRosa Grunt, he wrote this story of The Conjuring on their case. And he got the idea because he saw Ed Warren on TV and he was talking about the case of the Perrin farmhouse, right? And he actually played one of the original tapes. And it was so fucking creepy and scary that, you know, the light bulb went on and he said, okay, we gotta write this film, right? He wrote it. And then you flash forward into, you know, a couple years later, he's trying to get the film off the ground, and they pull the rug from him from this company that he was gonna, you know, make the movie with. And the reason being is that they pulled the rug out because they wanted to do A Haunting in Connecticut, because at that time, that was a big film. And at the time, they decided that was probably gonna be scarier than The Conjuring, but that's where they fucked up. So anyways, he sold his script to Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema. And when they bought it, they said, hey, we love it, we're gonna go ahead and get started on this. And, you know, the first person they had attached to it was my favorite director, James Wan. And a lot of you guys know James Wan because he did Saw, he did Dead Silence, and he also did, and a lot of you guys know James Wan because he did Saw, he did Dead Silence, he did Insidious, and a lot of his stuff was always in collaboration with Leigh Whannell. Well, this was his first project, actually, away from Leigh Whannell. And, you know, a lot of people were thinking, okay, does he have the chops to do it by himself? Can he do it? And, you know, they hit a home run with this. I mean, if you've seen the film, right? Then they brought on a good ensemble of a cast, right? So you had Patrick Wilson. And, you know, he's a pretty well-known actor, right? He was going to play Ed Warren. Then they brought in Vera Farmiga. And a lot of us remember her from The Orphan, from the Psycho TV series and everything. She's another great actor of herself, right? They also brought in Ron Livingston. And Ron Livingston, he's pretty well known because he did the movie Office Space, you know, kind of a comedic role. Almost iconic in a way with that film, right? And then they also brought in one of my other favorite actresses that I thought was really a good choice. Was they brought in Lili Taylor, right? She's done films like The Haunting, so she's done supernatural ghost films and stuff like that. But she was also in another one of my favorite films, Ransom. You know, she played one of the bad guys in there. She was a badass, had the neck tattoo and everything. And I thought this was a good casting call for her because, you know, she knows how to play that innocent card really good, and she was really good when they cast her in this. I mean, down to the wire, even to the point, like, towards the ending when she was being possessed and things like that. Another one of my favorite castings that they did, they brought in Joseph Bashir, right? And I know a lot of people won't recognize that name, but if you're a horror movie fan like me, you guys recognize that name because he did the music for Insidious, and he played the Red Demon in Insidious. So he did the music for The Conjuring, and he also played, Bathsheba, which is kind of a play off his name, the possessed demon in this film. And he plays that character very well, and it's just like, holy shit. So, I mean, this has James Wan's fingerprints all over on it because, with James Wan, he always throws little winks to all of his previous films and the people that he's worked with and things like that. Very similar to Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie, he likes to bring in a lot of the similar cast in his movies now, right? And so when they decided to do this movie, they filmed it within, 30 plus days. They shot it from first scene to last scene, all in chronological order. And they filmed it all in 2012. And they were trying to get it for, December to be released. The problem with that is that they kept having issues with the MPAA, and they kept giving it an R rating. So the film was about 2.5 hours. They chopped out 30 minutes of it, so now we got the 2-hour cut that we see now. And every time they kept cutting it, they finally said, the MPAA, they came out and said, hey, this film's so fucking scary, we have to give it an R rating. Even though there's very little cussing, no nudity, and very little blood, they still gave it an R rating because of the fact that it's fucking scary. So, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, not many films could say that, especially some of the newer ones out there. They really can't say that because a lot of them, that have to do with ghosts and supernatural, they go typically for, the hard PG-13 rating. But this film, because it was so scary and such the build-up, they had to give it an R rating. I think the only other film that I know of that was close like that was The Exorcist. So that's why I can see the similarities between how people are like, it's scarier than The Exorcist. No, it can't be scarier than The Exorcist. And you have that argument case for it. They had Lorraine Warren and Caroline Perrin, the victim and the investigator from the original case that went on in the 70s. They had them there as consultants, telling them, hey, this is what really happened. This door opened, she got dragged here and there. They really played it down to the details of it, which I thought was really cool, which made it even more terrifying, right? So with this whole story of The Conjuring, before I get into it and everything, y'all know I like to throw in all the little tidbits and everything like that. It's an interesting story. And if you've never seen this film, go check it out. Because like I said, there's going to be some people that are going to say oh, it's not as scary as The Exorcist, or it is scarier than The Exorcist. I'll let you guys be the judge. But I will tell you this, me researching for this episode, it was hard for me to watch this film now and actually sit and soak in every little scene because of the fact of, one, I live alone, and two, in order for me to get into a horror film, get really into it, I sit in the dark and just watch it, so it's a different ball game. If you sit in the dark and watch this film, you'll know what I'm talking about, right? But anyways, what's cool about this film is that it starts off, you hear this dialogue of this girl, and she says, okay, it started off small. There was a leg moving, an arm moving, and we thought nothing of it. And, then you hear this other voice, this male voice, which ends up being Ed Warren, played by Patrick Wilson. And, he says, well, do you think it could have been a friend that has a spare key that was playing a trick on you? And the whole time I love this shot because it shows a close-up of this doll and it zooms back. And you don't know who this doll is. And eventually they start talking about their stories about how they had all these weird paranormal shit happening. So they went out to go see a psychic medium who said, hey, there was a spirit that died in that apartment. It wants to go into the doll. And they basically gave it the okay to go into the doll. And the name of the spirit was Annabelle Higgins. And that's how you got the whole story of how Annabelle came about, right? And so when all this shit was going down with them, they were talking about how they came home from work one day because they were nurses. And they saw that, they left Annabelle in the spare room and she left a little note on the floor that said, miss me, right? And with that being said, they went into the spare room. It was all fucked up, tore up, and there was a crown everywhere. And then she dropped the crown. You can hear a roll close to them. So they freaked out, got Annabelle, and they threw her in the trash. Later on that night, they tried to sleep, and they kept hearing a banging on their door like someone's pounding it, right? So they both get up. They go out there. They open the door. It's nobody. They look on the ground. It was that note that said, miss me. Then they hear a pounding that was in their middle hallway closet. And, when they opened the door, it was Annabelle there. And that's when they started flipping the fuck out. And so they were telling this whole story to Ed and Lorraine Warren. And they basically said, this is what's going on. Is there any way that you guys could help us? And then that's when Ed and Lorraine, they broke it down and said, hey, we've seen this before. And they broke it down in a scientific term, which was really cool. Because they basically said, okay, ghosts don't have the power of this. This has to be something evil and malevolent. It's a dark spirit that wants to get inside of you guys, that wants to take over.
You wanted to get
and they said, it can't be a ghost. It's more or less something that's never walked the earth. It's something demonic, right? And as they're explaining it, then all of a sudden you see that it like zooms back, and then it's like a film, and they shut it off. Then you see that it's Ed and Lorraine. They're at a school, or they're doing some kind of presentation talking about the Annabelle case. And then that's when they started taking questions. People were asking them, well, who are you guys? What do they call you? Well, some call us, demonologists, paranormal investigators, and Lorraine Warren, she joked and said they call us kooks. And, I thought it was pretty cool how they introduced you to Ed and Lorraine Warren, which is why I said they did a damn good job, because after that it pauses, then you see all the writing coming down. Kind of very similar to, I guess you could say, Star Wars-like, So you see all the writing come down, and it starts explaining who the Warrens were and how they have done numerous cases, some of their well-known ones we all know about. But then they started saying that this case was so malevolent, they never really brought it to light until this film, The Conjuring. So, I mean, it was a great fucking build-up how they started it, right? Now you meet the whole Perrin family, the family that gets affected by this, right? And you kind of get the vibe that they're moving from their original home because it just didn't work out, the family grew. You meet Ron Livingston's character, who plays the character of Roger. And then you meet Lily Taylor's character, who plays the character of Carolyn, right? And they're both married, so their last name's obviously Perrins. But it tells her life, how she had 2 kids, he had 3 kids. They didn't specify who had more kids or not, but they both had their own pair of kids, and they got married. And it was kind of like very Brady Bunch-like, And so they moved away from their house in Jersey. They got this big-ass farmhouse and all this land. All the kids that they have were all daughters, right? And so as they walk in, they're all excited to see it. Hell, they even had a family dog. Well, what was crazy, though, is that when they were going in the house, they had the dog, and the dog didn't want to go in the house. And I thought it was really cool how they play that aspect because, in real paranormal things, animals can sense things a lot better than humans, right? So the dog didn't want to come in. He's like, what the hell's wrong with you, dog? So he just let the dog stay out, right? So all the daughters are all going through, having a good time, checking out the house and all that stuff. And then eventually they said, okay, let's play this game called Hide and Clap, right? It's basically hide and seek, and they do like the Bird Box challenge where they have that shit around their, around their eyes, so they're blindfolded, and then they give, they're given 3 claps, right, to find them where they're at. As they're doing that, then all of a sudden, she's like, oh, I got you, and they bump into this door, and this door had, I guess it was sealed, like wood sealed, and they knocked out a plank. And so that's when Roger comes in. He's like, ah, shit, what'd you break, right? So they go over there and they see that there's this little pathway in it. So you got to remember, this is the 70s that it took place. The movie will tell you in 1971, but realistically, it took place in 1970 to 1973, right? So they didn't have any like old school lanterns and stuff like that. The old time thing was get a box of matches, you light the match, and then you look, right? So that's what he did. Then they start breaking down like all the planks, and they get down and they figured out that they had this hidden cellar. So they go down in the cellar and they say, what the hell are we going to do with all this? This is all the junk that the owners didn't want. And he's like, well, we'll go through, we'll clean it up. Maybe there's some antiques we can sell it for and get money, right? So later on, it goes into how they're adapting at the night, right? All the girls are all complaining about things, and then they go to sleep or whatever. Then you see Carol, and then you also see Roger. They're kind of canoodling a little bit, like, oh, this is going to work out. I promise it's going to work out. Then the morning hits, right? And as the morning hits, you start seeing little things here and there that go off, right? All the clocks are broken at 3:07 a.m., right? They're just, all of them stop at 3:07. And then as, Carol's coming out, she's over there, seeing her daughters. They're all like, yeah, it's really cold in here, Then they see the oldest daughter, Andrea. She's like, yeah, typical teenager. Hey, couldn't you get a house with a toilet that works? And there was this rotten smell. Well, is the smell still there? No. Well, problem solved. Typical parenting. We all had that tough love, right? So anyway, she goes down there. That's when she sees the clock, and they said, okay, fuck it. And so they start making breakfast. Then Ron comes in, and they start talking about how they slept, and they said, hey, all the clocks are broken at 3:07. Do you know what's up with this? He's like, I don't know, maybe something blew out, right? And then she goes, she said something because obviously the night before they had sex, so she's like, speaking of beating up, I mean, look at all these bruises. She's like, whoa, I didn't do that. Then the youngest daughter comes in. The youngest daughter's name is April, and she basically says, hey, I want to go see where Sadie's at, right? And, they said, okay, well, you go get Sadie. She's probably hungry. So the youngest daughter goes out, and she goes and sees the dog. And when she sees the dog is dead. Which is like, what the fuck? So obviously that whole scene went on about where they're just like freaking out because they didn't show what happened to the dog. They just showed that the dog was chained up and there was blood around the neck. So they don't know. They never explained that. I think in the real case, they said that the dog was like dragged around or something like that, but you know, it's just, it builds up suspense, like, oh shit, something dark is here, right? Then it flash forwards back to the Warrens after their whole presentation. They're meeting with this news reporter, and this news reporter is asking them about like all their investigations. So they go into, I guess you could say, the Warrens' collection room, right? If you're a horror fan, we all have one of those, right? So they go into the collection room, and the news reporter's like, so all these artifacts, all these are all haunted in some way. He's like, yeah, exactly. You know, and he's, you know, trying to look at one of them, trying to touch. It's like, don't touch. And then they're all like, well, how come you don't just destroy them, burn them? Then Ed Warren, he said the best line out of the whole film, sometimes it's better to keep the genie in the bottle. And I was like, oh shit, this is really cool how they did this. They play a lot of paranormal investigation shit on this, right? So that's when they start talking about Annabelle, you know, from the beginning. And then they go over there and they see Annabelle's locked up in this case, right? It's an actual doll. The real doll was a Raggedy Ann doll. For licensing purposes, they couldn't do that. So they made it look like one of the creepy puppet dolls. Something that James Wan loves to do, you know? It looked very similar to, like, I guess you could say a girl version of Billy the Puppet from Saw. And then they start talking about all the cases. And then they said, well, you know, what happened with the exorcism with your wife? And he's like, well, that was different. That something went wrong. And then all of a sudden you see Ed's daughter goes in there and she's trying to snoop around. As he sees his daughter, he stops the news reporter and he's like, hey, did you touch anything? She's like, no. And I guess his daughter is very curious about the stuff that they do. And he keeps telling her, hey, you can't be in here, you can't be in here. So he takes her out so she can go hang out with Lorraine. And then after that, the news reporter leaves. They have kind of a little bit of dialogue about, you know, having a good time and their family. And then you see that Lorraine is rocking this old school chair and combing her daughter Judy's hair. And, you know, it was the 70s, right? So as that's going on, then it goes back and follows the Perron family, right? So now it's day number 2 about how they're going to live their life, you know, in this farmhouse, this haunted farmhouse, right? So they all go to sleep, and then that's when all of the other activities start, right? So that's when you see one of the other girls. You have Nancy and Christine. They share a room together because they're the closest in age, kind of like the Brady Bunch, right? And Christine is the one who gets messed with a lot. They kept pulling her foot, they kept pulling the blankets off, and she thinks it's her sister. So she's telling her, Nancy, stop it. Stop farting, I can smell it over here. You know, typical kid shit, right? And while that's going on, you see Roger downstairs. He's laying on his desk and everything. The TV goes off. You know, he's having a nice glass of whiskey. And all of a sudden, he's like, okay, it's the end of the night. He shuts off the TV. And then all of a sudden, he starts hearing these noises. And he starts seeing shit himself. He starts seeing this door is like creaking open, going outside. So he goes over there, he closes the door, locks it. And all of a sudden, he starts hearing this, like this banging. And then his daughter's at the steps. And Andrea's telling him, like, hey, Cindy's over here and she's sleepwalking again. And they're all like, oh, shit. So they go over there and they see that Cindy, she's walking to this big-ass cabinet that was left there. You know, it was already there. And she keeps walking to this cabinet, like, bashing her head. And Andrea's like, I've never seen it like this. He's like, okay, well, we just got to get her back to sleep and everything. He puts his hand on her head and everything and guides her back to the room so she can go to sleep. Now, the next morning, everything's all bright and dandy. They still notice that the 3:07 is dead on the clock. You know, all the clocks stop at 3:07, right? So all the girls, they go to school and everything. She says bye. You find out that Roger, he's actually a truck driver. And in those days for truck driving, man, they did some long fucking turnaround distance times, right? So Roger wasn't there. And it ended up being just Caroline, and it also ended up being the youngest daughter, April. Well, as she goes upstairs to check on April, she's talking to somebody that's there. Yeah, and when they had first moved in, she had found this little wind-up toy, which was pretty cool looking. You know, it was like a circus theme, and then when you looked in the mirror, it had a little swirl in it, right? And so she's holding on to this toy, she's talking to somebody. You don't see it, which is cool. And then all of a sudden she opens the door. She's like, who are you talking to, sweetie? Oh, I'm talking to Rory. She's like, well, who's Rory? Oh, he's the kid that used to live here. You want to see him? She's like, yeah. You know, because kids at that time, when they're really young, you know, nobody really thinks about the fact that they have an invisible friend, right? This plays on them. And so she says, okay, if you want to see him, you got to wind up the toy and look in the mirror. So she's looking at the mirror swirling around and everything in the toy. And then she thinks she sees a ghost, and all of a sudden her daughter scares her. Boom! Mommy! And then she says, okay, Mom, let's go play hide and clap. The other girls don't let me play. And it's the truth, because we all grew up. The youngest one, we never allowed the youngest one to do shit, you know? So she said, okay, let's go ahead and play hide and clap. So she goes and hides, Carolyn, she goes and puts the blindfold on her and ties it up and everything. And so she says, okay, first clap. And she walks into the stair bars that's right there. All right, first clap. Oh,
Second clap.
Shit. And then she's like, second clap, because, you know, she's trying to check her knee and shit. So she's walking into the room, and then she goes into Andrea's room. And she's like, all right, third clap. And then this dresser that Cindy was hitting her head opens up, and then you see these fucking hands pop out and does a slow clap. So she goes slowly walking in there, sees all the clothes, and shifts it back, and then she takes off her blindfold. She's like, what the fuck? And then that's when her daughter comes up behind her and says, hi, I scared you, Mommy. You had no idea. I was over there in Cindy and Nancy's room. Now this is where you start seeing all the paranormal activity go down. Like, oh shit, something's not right here. and it's building up. And you could feel, just watching this and being absorbed into this film, you could feel that it's dark. It's something that wants them. And then it travels back to Ed and Lorraine Warren, how they had to get dressed and go out because they heard of this other activity from this other couple. And this other couple, they said, okay, you know, where's all the noise coming from? They're all like, oh, it's coming from the attic, right? So what I thought was cool about this scene, they go up into the attic, and then they're like, oh, you hear the noise? That's the noise. And then Ed debunked it right away, said, oh, because these boards are so old, they stretch out, and then with the wind and everything, that's all the pipes that you're hearing. And they're all like, so this house isn't haunted? And Lorraine's like, usually never is. It's just there's always some kind of thing that can explain everything, right? And it shows how they debunked it, which I thought was really important in this film because now it brings in a sense of realism into this. Like, okay, well, they debunked this shit because they know it's not haunted because of these old pipes in the old house. But later on, you find out what's going on with the Parent family. And during that same night, now it goes back to the Parent family of what's going on. And I love this scene because, you know, here it has, I'm a science nerd, right? So it shows that she's just sitting there, like, in the bathroom, looking in the mirror. Sleepwalk is playing in the background. And she's looking at all the bruises on her arms and everything. And then it shows that she opens the cabinet and she takes iron pills, right? And when she takes iron pills, she's starting to do the laundry. Then all of a sudden, you know, she thinks all the girls are asleep. And she starts hearing these clapping noises and then all these different voices. And she thinks the daughters are fucking with her. So she goes downstairs and she sees the cellar door slowly opening. She's like, oh, hell no. So she goes down there and she's at the top of the cellar. And she says, any of you kids are down here messing with me, I'm gonna lock you in. As she tries to leave, the door slams on her fucking face, right? And so she goes rolling back down. And then all of a sudden she starts freaking out and she goes back up, right? And she goes back up, all of a sudden all the lights break. And she's flipping out. So she grabs the box of matches that was there, lighting them. And then she's looking down, and then the match burns out. So she lights it again, and then looks up, and then you hear this voice that says, hey, wanna play hide and clap? And then she's like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden you see the clapping hands. Boom, boom, right behind her, just like, oh, shit! Then she's trying to bust out of the door and everything. As that's going on, Cindy, the sleepwalker, she walks back in, and she's banging her head again on the same cabinet in Andrea's room. Andrea wakes up, and she's like, what the fuck is going on? So she goes and tries to stop her and everything. She looks up and she sees this fucking hideous looking ghost, which you later find on that it ends up being Bathsheba. And when Bathsheba looks at her dead eye, you know, eye to eye contact, she jumps on her and attacks her. As that's going on, then you see Roger, he's barely pulling in his truck, he stops and then all of a sudden he hears all the screams. He runs in the house, drops all this shit, opens the cellar door so that way Carolyn gets out, and then they start running up to check on their daughters. They open Andrea's door and they see that they were fighting with nothing. So it was just very dark, very scary, and it was just a slow, methodical build-up to how that was going on. Because at the same time, Carolyn was getting attacked downstairs in the cellar. They were also attacking the daughters, which made it even fucking creepier. After that whole scene went on, they all got freaked out and everything. Then it travels back to Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're doing another presentation, right? They're talking about how they went to this farmhouse, and they were talking about how this guy was a French-Canadian farmer. And, you know, he only had like a third-grade education. And they said they knew he was possessed because he started speaking Latin. And he would speak really good Latin and even speak it backwards. Then they start showing on the video footage that they had, like, from the screening, is that you could see like an upside-down cross coming in, and then they started crying tears of blood, which was crazy. And then they started doing the exorcism. Then they shut it off. And it implies that there was an exorcism that went wrong with them that Lorraine couldn't handle. And they never really answered questions about that. Then people were asking questions like, well, what do you do in that situation? He's like, oh, that brings me to my 3 steps of demonic entities, right? So he pulls up the screen and everything. And then that's when he starts explaining it, how they want to tear him down and everything, and then slowly want to take over. And what I thought was really fucking cool about this scene is that as it's zooming in to Caroline, all the way in the back, you see the real Lorraine Warren in the front. She made a cameo role. I was like, oh shit, that's really cool. That's James Wan for you right there, right? So they start zooming in to Caroline, and you know, that's when she starts understanding like, oh shit, I have all that going on, right? So she meets with the assistant, Drew, and as Ed and Lorraine Warren are loading up their car, Drew comes up and says, hey, I got someone here that wants to meet you. Then Caroline starts telling her about these things, and then Ed's like, no, it's too late, we gotta get going, and you know, then she's like, please, I have 5 daughters at home, they're scared to death, we're all sleeping in one room, just come down and check it out, please, please. And you know, Lorraine Warren, she has a daughter, obviously they have their own daughter, and they say, well, we'll go and stop by and see what's going on, right? So it shows that they, you know, pack up their stuff and they go to meet up with Caroline, right? And they go to the actual house. And as they're in the house, you know, you see Lorraine is just, she's holding the cross, and she's just, you know, starting to feel everything. And that's when they, you know, introduce the whole family, they introduce all the daughters and everything like that. And then they said, okay, well, why is this door shut and locked up? And that's when Roger comes out and he says, well, it prevents it from banging at night, you know, and it comes in threes, just like boom, 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 and then it stops at dawn. And then that's when Ed's like, okay, well, that's a sign of, you know, a mocking of the Trinity. That's usually demonic. And then they start talking about all the different signs of what it is, right? And then little by little, all the activity starts happening around in the Warrens, and they start figuring out things. Then little by little, they start to figure out, like, okay, there is some things that can't be explained here. So Ed, he busts out his old school tape recorder, and, you know, he starts recording the conversation and says, okay, tell me everything from the start. And, you know, that's when she starts explaining everything. Then later on, it follows the Warrens, how they're back at home, and they said, okay, we're going to try and research this house. And that's when they try to get information on them from, like, okay, do you know anything about the house and stuff? And that's when they said, no, we just bought it at short auction from the bank and stuff like that. So Lorraine and Ed, they did all their research on it. Comes to find out the house and the land was haunted because it was used to be owned by Bathsheba, right? And Bathsheba, she's a relative of one of the original witches that were hanged in the witch trial. And the original witch was Marytown Eastie. And Bathsheba, they never said what type of relative she was. They just said she was an original relative. She got married, had a child, and once the child, I think, was a few weeks old, you know, she went crazy, sacrificed the baby in front of her husband, and then went outside to the tree and hung herself and proclaimed herself to Satan. So they found out that the land was even bigger, and then they come to find out that it was all subsidized and everything like that. And then there was other paranormal things happening around the area for all the other houses. And they said, okay, well, this person, you know, hung himself and got killed, and this person. And then they also found out what the 307 stand for. You know, she killed herself at 3:07 a.m. And as they're discovering all this information, now the tape player plays. And at the same time, the tape player, Ed, was having issues with it because it didn't record anything Carolyn said. And so all of a sudden, you hear his voice, and then you hear all the demonic voices just like... It was just really fucking creepy. So the next day comes, and then that's when they start explaining to them, like, hey, you have a real haunting of what's going on. And they told them about all the discoveries of what happened. About, like, okay, this house used to be owned by Bathsheba and things like that, and they did a lot of dark shit here. And then that's when they started telling them, like, hey, we need to, like, act on it now. I gotta go through the church and stuff and figure out what the fuck is going on. They find out that none of the children are baptized. So then they're like, oh shit, we really gotta, you know, rush on this. So they bring in their extra crew. They bring in Drew, their assistant, and they also bring in the officer to help them out, Officer Brad Hamilton. And what they do is that now you see the scene where they're starting to set up all the paranormal investigation stuff, right? So they're setting up the cameras, they're setting up the bells on the door, they're setting up the thermal sensors. And the reason why they have the thermal sensors, which I thought was really cool, is that they have it set up to the camera. So if there's a drop in temperature, it will take a picture of things, right? And they explain that in there because Roger was asking, well, why you gotta put a thermostat on there? And that's when they said, okay, when entities make their presence known, there's a drop in temperature and then it will take a picture, right? So they're all sitting there and everything like that. And you know, Officer Brad Hamilton, he's one of the funny characters of this film. You know, he was just like, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I don't believe in any of this stuff, right? So they're in the house, and all of a sudden, you know, he's using the restroom, and all of a sudden this door slowly opens. They'll all run up and everything, ready to go, you know, capture the footage. And slowly the door comes out a little bit more. Then he walks out and he's like, what? I had to go. So he was in the fucking bathroom and he set off the, you know, one of the alarms. And then later on, as it starts getting later on in the night, they're just thinking, okay, we're not going to see anything. And then all of a sudden, that's when boom, shit started happening, right? All of a sudden, Cindy, the sleepwalker, she wakes up. And all of a sudden, as she's walking, they start hearing the cameras go off. And that's when Roger's like, hey, wait, we need to go get her. And it's like, no, she's not by herself. What? She's not setting up the camera. Something's with her, right? And so it plays on that aspect of the fact of, you know, if there's a drop in temperature, it will set off the pictures, right? So it set off all these pictures, you know, before she goes up the stairs, and then into the room. And then that's when they run in there, they break down the door, and they can't find her. And then Roger's looking out like, where is she? Where is she? And then that's when they go down and they get one of those UV lights, and they're looking to see all the imprints, which I thought was really cool because they explained some of the tools. The UV light will see like a handprint, footprint that's been left there for like a good 5-10 minutes. They see that it's inside that cabinet right there where Cindy always keeps going into, right? So they open it up, and then comes to find out there's like a hidden wall, and then there was a hole right through the wall. And because of it being an old house, they have a lot of empty space in between. So he puts his head in there and he sees that Cindy was in there, and he's like, okay, I found her. So they pull her out, and then that's when you see April next to Lorraine, and she says, that's where Rory goes when he's scared. And so Lorraine's like, oh shit, something's up, right? So she goes in there and she sees everything, and she sees all these little kids' toys, and then that's when she asks for Rory's little wind-up box from April. And so she goes and puts it in, and you see there's a little spot for it, right? And that's when she starts feeling different things. And she starts feeling different things, all of a sudden she steps back and falls right through the house. And they start flipping out because she goes all the way down, and so she lands in the cellar. As Lorraine's in the cellar, that's when she sees, you know, the old maid that's there. And the old maid that's there, you know, they start flipping out because the maid's like, he made me do it, she made me do it, she made me do it. And then, you know, she starts picturing everything together from all the cases that she knows, and she's looking all around, and then finally she gets out of the house. And as she gets out of the house, that's when she says, okay, this is what's going on. This is why she's over here getting all bruised up. She's been trying to possess her all the fucking time of what's going on. And she explains the whole thing about how she's going in there and how she's been trying to possess Carol and everything like that, because what Bathsheba does is that she possesses the mom to go and kill their firstborn child, or one of the youngest children. And that's when all hell breaks loose on this, right? All of a sudden, what I thought was crazy is that like all the crosses, they start going down. The house starts shaking. Right? And all of a sudden you see Nancy's hair go up, like in static. And they're like, Nancy? Then she gets pulled by her hair, thrown across the whole house. And what I thought was interesting is that Carol's just sitting there, just standing, just like... And if you watch this film, pay attention to Carol in that scene. You see Carol sitting back, and you see everybody else trying to grab Nancy and try to stop her. And then all of a sudden, Lorraine, she grabs the scissors and cuts her hair. So she, you know, is letting go, right? And then, you know, that's when they said, okay, we all need to get the fuck out of the house. We got the footage, let's go get it with the priest and see what's going on. And so before all this had went down, you see that there was a scene where Carol was actually trying to take a nap. You know, all the kids are out, they were going out for ice cream and stuff like that. She has, you know, she goes to sleep, she sleeps on her back, and then she wakes up and she has a dream of Bashira, like, throwing up in her mouth, so she starts throwing up, right? And, you know, then later on, it kind of plays into this aspect, because why else was the mom just sitting there, just like, as her daughter's getting fucking thrown all around, right? Pay attention to that, because I did after I saw this film like 6 times in one day. I was like, oh shit, she's just sitting right there. What the fuck? You know? And then, so afterwards, they got everybody all packed up. They said, okay, the whole family's going to go stay at the motel. We're going to go to the church right away. And that's when they decided, okay, they went to the church and they started talking to the priest. And the priest is like, well, because they're not baptized and because they're not members of the church, we have to get the answer straight from the Vatican. And they're all like, we don't know how long it's going to take. And then they showed all the footage of what happened. Everything from the kid grabbing Cindy, the sleepwalker, and showing her like the room and everything, showing the video footage of what had happened and everything. They said, okay, we don't know how long it's going to take, right? And as that's going on, Lorraine, she's worried because of the fact of, you know, she had visions of her daughter like drowning in the water. It was basically Bashira, she was sending out a message saying, hey, you need to leave or I'm going to go after your daughter, right? And so they start freaking out about that. And as they're still at the church, you know, it shows that it's suddenly getting dark, right? And then all of a sudden it starts raining. And it's, you know, it fits that theme where it's dark, it's raining. And all of a sudden Judy, she starts hearing, you know, these noises. Like the same shit that's happening to the parents is happening to Judy. She's getting tugged in the bed and everything, and she's hearing noises. So she gets up and she, you know, walks down the hallway of their house, right? And, you know, as she goes through, she sees that, the main collection room door is open, which is never open. It has big old signs that says, do not enter, all this shit. And their daughter, she goes into that room to see everything, and she sees that everything's still in place except the Annabelle doll. Then she starts hearing noises, and so she starts running all over in the house. So she goes into her mom's room, closes the door, and then you see that rocking chair where she was rocking with her mom, and her mom was combing her hair. You see Bashira, she's just rocking this chair, and all of a sudden you see Annabelle just sitting right there, and then Annabelle slowly turns her head and stares at her, and that's when she starts screaming, "Mom! Oh, Nana! Because they had Lorraine Warren's mom was living with them, right? And while that's going on, Lorraine, she obviously felt that something was wrong, so they rushed home, right? And as they, got into the house and everything, they're trying to break down the door. They break down the door just in time. They see this chair come up and swing, misses them by just a hair, right? And as that's going on, then all of a sudden, Roger, he gets home to the hotel, and that's when his daughters come out and they said, "Hey, Mom took April and Christine. I don't know where they went. They just upped and left. I don't know what the hell's going on." And she smelled like rotten meat. And that's when they started flipping out. And so they called up the Warrens. And so that's when they figured out, oh shit, she's going back to the house. We know she's going to go back to the house. And they said, okay, we'll meet you back over there. And that's when Lorraine was telling them, like, hey, she's going to do what she did to all of the same other people. They bring them back to the house, possess them, so they can kill their children, right? And so they're kind of bickering where, he's like, okay, you stay here, I'm going to go and do this. And, that's when she's like, no, I fucked up last time. God put us together for a reason. We're going to go and handle this shit, right? So they get over there to the house with Officer Brad Hamilton and Drew and everybody. And once they go over there, they can't break down the door. So, Officer Brad Hamilton, he's like, out of the way! Blows the fucking door open. And that's when they hear that they're all in the cellar. And Roger, he's trying to fight off his wife, because she has scissors and she's holding her daughter and she's like trying to stab her. So they break her up and everything like that. And then that's when Drew takes the daughter out and locks her into the police car and says, hey, stay right here. I gotta go find April. No, I gotta go find her. Just stay here. I promise I'll come back. So he's looking throughout the whole house trying to find April. Well, that's going on. They're still trying to fight with Carolyn, who's being slowly possessed by Bathsheba, right? And while this is going on, they have this back and forth where they're fighting. And then she bites Officer Brad Hamilton's cheek off. And that's when they said, okay, she put a sheet over her head. They put her down on a chair. They tried tying her down, and then they couldn't, so he had to put his handcuffs on her just so that way she can, let go of Ed. And this is where the creepy stuff starts happening, right? All the shit that's like, ooh, right? And that's when he says, okay, the priest is not going to get here in time. I got to do the exorcism. And everyone's like, what? You're not a priest. And he's like, you got a better idea? So she's like, okay, well, I'm going to go get the book and I'm going to help you. And he's arguing with her. No! Remember what happened last time? And then that's when she basically said it again. Well, God put us together for this, and this is it. We got to help them. So she goes and gets the book, and they start the prayers, right? And they start reading in Italian and in Latin. And as he's doing that, he's throwing holy water on her. And as she's being possessed, she's just screaming on the top of her lungs. And, if you've never seen possession movies, they're really creepy because, you can see the transformation kind of going on. What's like, okay, you see her begging for help, but then you see the spirit taking over her. And as he keeps throwing holy water, and she coughs up blood, spits it all over on the sheet that's on her face. Then Roger's freaking out because she's asking for help and saying, Roger, help me. And he's like, damn it, you're gonna fucking kill her. You're gonna kill her. And she's like, understand this. We're fighting for her soul right now. And that's when, she's still shaking and everything like that. And that's when one of my other favorite
the saints and all the angels, I command you to reveal yourself!
And as she's screaming, the whole sheet starts to spill open. And then you see the casket. And everybody's like, oh shit. Like you see Bathsheba coming out of her, right? And all of a sudden it slowly starts to get quiet as he's still saying the prayer. The chair lifts up, goes upside down, and then keeps banging on the floor. And then that's when he yells at it, like, put her down! So it drops, and that's when they go after her to try to hold her down. And then all of a sudden, as that happens, then all the shit starts falling down, trying to attack Ed. Then that's when, Roger, he looks at his wife, and he's like, you need to get the fuck out of my wife! Get out of my wife! And then that's when, Bathsheba turns around and says, she's already gone. And now you're all gonna die. And then, as that's going on, Drew finally finds April where she's at. She's underneath the floorboards in the kitchen. So he gets a fire poker and he breaks the shit out of this. And then he's like, I found April, she's underneath the kitchen. As that happens, that was one of the dumbest things to do, because after that, now Bathsheba knows where she's at. So she grabs these old school metal scissors, runs through the middle of the house trying to find her. And as they're following her, they see that Bathsheba finds her daughter, finds Caroline's daughter, April. And as they're going through, that's when they start saying, no, don't do this, don't do this. Then that's when you see Ed Warren, he comes out of the hole because he's not big enough to fit. That's when he starts calling out, Bathsheba! Bathsheba! And Bathsheba, full on transformation, turns around and starts screaming, by the power of God, I condemn you back to hell.
I condemn you back to
hell. You had Lorraine Warren, she got up there and she put her hand on Bathsheba and said, no, Caroline, don't do this, don't do this. So she's making her see what she's doing wrong, right? She's doing her spiritual work on her and says, this is the memory that you had shown me. Do you want to leave this behind? And then little by little, she starts fading, right? And then she throws up, and she gets rid of the possessed spirit, right? And now it's slowly, coming up to daylight. And then, this is kind of a happy ending where everyone's all happy and all that stuff like that. Officer Brad Hamilton, he makes jokes of oh yeah, I'd rather deal with a guy with a gun any day of the week than this. Just random shit like that. And so when they get home, they hear a message that the priest said, the exorcism was given the okay by the Vatican. And that's when they start joking, well, just in time, right? And they say, well, we got another case that we got to go up to in Jersey, which I thought, oh shit, they're very well known for the Amity case that went on with the Amity House. And that's where everyone was thinking, okay, now they're going to have to make a film about the Amity, right? And so as that was done, they went to go and put in, Rory's little spin box. They put it in on their shelf in the collection. It shows a quote from Ed Warren, and as the film is going to end, it zooms into this musical box, and then it starts playing. And then it does this loud bang sound. Boom! And then it ends, right? Great fucking film. And what I loved about it is that at the ending, they, reintroduced the story again, and they said, okay, the Conjuring. Then they show all the real case files of it. They show the real family, how they were affected, and they showed the actor's name next to, which family member that they were playing. Then it was showing all the news articles and all the real facts on this film and what made it true, what made it real, right? And to this day, I will tell you this is one of the hardest episodes I had to do because watching this film, it was just really hard. Just paying attention to things like that. And if you've ever been around situations where you had to, get into something like how this film was, it's scary as fuck, That's the thing with it. With that being said, I will tell you this film, I can make the argument that it's up there, that it's scary as hell as The Exorcist, maybe even a little bit more than The Exorcist, because they have all the documentations to still, prove the fact that this really went on. And what's interesting to note is that after they did the whole exorcism and everything, they never had an issue again with it, right? And what I thought was even more cool was the fact that you had Lorraine Warren and Caroline Perrin, the original people that were there with this, they were consulting on this film to make this, true deform of what really had happened and what really had went down. And that's what made this film really fucking scary, And as for our first film away from doing, collaborations with Lee Winnell, James Wan hit this out of the fucking park. I mean, you could tell with the long shots and everything like that, James Wan's fingerprints was all over on this film. But what's also even more interesting and cool about this is that this built off, a whole franchise of movies, right? So not only did, you see the sequel to this film, Conjuring 2, but you also got, 3 spin-offs just on Annabelle alone, right? You had an Annabelle movie that explained what happened, right before it got possessed. And then, they made another prequel of how it actually started with Annabelle. Then it went to, the Annabelle Part 1. And then now they had a recent one called Annabelle Comes Home, which follows all the way up before they went to the Parent House, right? Later on, when they did the sequel, The Conjuring 2, they decided, okay, we're going to include another demon in there, which they did. From one of their other cases, the Enfield case, that took place in the UK. And basically they had, another demon by the name of Valak, right? Valak is the one that we all know as the possessed nun. And so, with that being said, they made the Nun film. Now they're making a part 2 of the Nun. And what I also thought was interesting too is that they also kind of got into other folktale stuff. They got into La Llorona. And we all know La Llorona because of the fact of how it's, a scary folktale in the Hispanic culture. And I thought, when I went to go see that film, I was just like, nah, it can't be tied in. But then you see the priest from one of the Annabelle films in it, and I was like, oh shit, this is part of the whole Conjuring universe. So if you think about it, they have about 7 films right now, soon to be 8 or 9, with Conjuring 3 and then the Nun 2 coming out soon. So it's really interesting how this film spawned off the whole wave of it. And paranormal investigation, it's a hot topic right now because everybody all wants to get into it and see, if it's true, if it's not true, and things like that. And this film really pushed it out there. But also what I thought was cool about this is that they actually played into the real aspect of what happened with the house, how they bought the house, and they didn't know it was haunted. A lot of you guys might know, some of you may not know. I actually had to look this up on myself. Is that in the state of Rhode Island, they don't have to disclose any information when you buy a property or house of like what happened, if there was any demonic entities or if somebody, killed himself, if people got killed, any criminal activity. They don't have to disclose that in the state of Rhode Island. And what I thought was interesting, I was like, oh shit, I didn't believe that, and then I looked it up. Some states have to. I don't know if it's what states are. I know in the state of California, they do if you ask about it. If not, then, buyer beware, I guess, right? But in the state of Rhode Island, they don't have to disclose it. And I don't know if that rule or that law still exists, honestly. I tried looking it up and I couldn't find an answer on it. But I thought that was interesting, because I know most people are like, how the hell are you going to buy a house knowing that it's not haunted? You know what I'm saying? But it's just one of those things where, you never really think about it. Then when I started doing research for it, I was just like, oh shit, this is really interesting how they did this, And it's true. It really is true. So if you live out there in the Rhode Island area, make sure you always ask and try to do your homework and see if you're buying a place and it's not haunted. I know in the state of California, they don't have to give it to you by law, but if you ask, I know for a fact that they'll give it to you. Had to do research on that. That was kind of interesting to figure that out. I did not know that at all. And the sad thing is, too, when I started thinking about this, is that Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were really good people. When you do your research on them and stuff like that, they were, one-of-a-kind people. Ed, unfortunately, he passed away first, and later on, recently this year in 2019, Lorraine Warren had passed, right before they did the opening of Annabelle 3 Comes Home. And it's truly unfortunate and sad because Lorraine Warren, she was such a sweetheart too. And, anybody and everybody that had questions about the paranormal investigations and things like that, you could ask her about it when you met her in person. She was open as a book that would tell you everything and anything about it. I think all the way up until in 2018, actually late 2017, she was doing special tours of their actual collection that they had of everything. And she would, you would be able to meet and greet and everything like that. And I thought it was really cool, because she would offer an in-depth window of how the realism is, with spiritual and supernatural stuff and dealing with entities and things like that. It's unfortunate that they both have passed on, and my condolences go out to their families and stuff like that, because I know when that had happened, no one expected it, because Lorraine and Ed, they were both such sweethearts. They really were, This film was originally titled The Warren Files. It was never meant to be called The Conjuring. I don't know where the Conjuring name came from, but I know they originally meant this film to be called The Warren Files because they wanted it to talk about all the different cases that didn't get mentioned as well, and they were really malevolent. The reason why they, stashed them away for so long is because they were really dark fucking cases. And they didn't want to go out there and say, okay, this is the case, this is the case. They didn't want to try and build off of money off of that, Which I thought was really cool about, the Warrens. But, when people really got into ghosts and paranormal investigations and all that stuff, it's just only a matter of time before people start finding out some of these malevolent cases that they had worked on. But anyways, with that being said... Oh man, what I missed, right? Oh shit. Whew. Hope you enjoyed that episode 52 with Possessed Billy. It's not often that I ever let him come out, but anyways guys, thank y'all for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all next time, as always.